Right, let's get straight into it. Today we're breaking down Swedepad 2, a really important Swedish trial that should fundamentally change how we think about endovascular treatment for intermittent claudication. The bottom line is this, and it's pretty blunt. For this group of patients, the expensive paclitaxel-coated devices offer absolutely no benefit over our standard, simple, uncoated balloons and stents. So the big question is, how did they prove this so definitively? Well, the power of that conclusion is all down to the trial's design and its execution. So let's unpack exactly how they built such a solid piece of evidence. As you know, any good trial begins with a crystal clear question. For Swedepad 2, that's laid out perfectly in its PICO statement, and this really is the bedrock for the entire study. Okay, let's break it down. The population. We're talking about adults with intermittent claudication, Rutherford categories 1 to 3, who are undergoing a standard infrainguinal procedure. The intervention, paclitaxel-coated balloons or drug-eluting stents. The comparison, standard uncoated balloons or bare metal stents. And now for the outcomes, and this part is absolutely crucial. The primary outcome wasn't patency or some other surrogate endpoint, it was disease-specific quality of life at 1 year, measured with the VascuCol-6. Secondary outcomes then looked at things like mortality, amputation, and reintervention. So from the very start, a really clear and, more importantly, a clinically relevant question. So that's the what. Now let's look at the how. We need to critically appraise the trial's methodology because the results are only as valid as the design that produced them. And the design here has some real strengths. Swedepad 2 is a pragmatic, nationwide, registry-based randomized control trial. By embedding it right into the SWID-VASC registry, the findings are much more reflective of real-world practice, which gives it excellent external validity. A really clever feature was randomizing after successful guidewire crossing. This keeps allocation concealed but makes the trial much more feasible to run. But you know, the real game changer here is the follow-up. By linking to mandatory national registries, they achieve near complete follow-up for hard endpoints like mortality. This practically eliminates attrition bias, which is a killer for so many long-term trials. But look, no trial is ever perfect, is it? The key limitation here, the one everyone points to, is that it was open label for the operators. Now, given the different devices, this was pretty much unavoidable. But it does introduce the potential for performance bias. You could imagine an operator being more likely to pop in a stent in the uncoated arm, for example. The investigators tried to mitigate this by making operators declare their stenting intention before randomization, but that potential for bias does remain. It's also worth pointing out that the trial had a really long recruitment period. This was partly because of that 15-month suspension during the initial paclitaxel safety scare. Now, that definitely affects the timeline, and you run the risk of practice evolving over a decade, but it doesn't fundamentally break the internal validity of the randomization or the final analysis. Okay, with the methodology properly scrutinized, let's get to the good stuff. What did the data actually show us? The primary outcome really boils down to this one single number. Minus 0.02. So what does that mean? Well, using a linear regression model, that was the mean difference in the VascuCol-6 score between the two groups at 1 year. And with a 95% confidence interval stretching from minus 0.66 to plus 0.62, it sails right across zero. This is an unequivocally negative result. And let's be blunt, for a condition where our only reason to intervene is to relieve symptoms, failing to improve a quality of life score is decisive. And the story is exactly the same when we look at the other outcomes. There was no statistically significant difference in target vessel reintervention rates, no difference in Rutherford class improvement, no difference in ABI changes, and no difference in major amputation rates. So the key takeaway is that even if there's a theoretical advantage in patency, it just did not translate into any measurable clinical benefit for the patient at all. So the absence of efficacy is one thing, but the data also hinted at a potential safety issue. And that signal is captured by this number, 1.47. Using Cox proportional hazards models, this is the hazard ratio for all-cause mortality at 5 years. The confidence interval, 1.09 to 1.98, does not cross 1. This indicates a statistically significant 47% higher risk of death in the paclitaxel group at this specific point in time. Now, it's important to be clear, this signal wasn't sustained over the entire follow-up period. But still, seeing this mortality signal pop up again in a large, well-conducted trial like this is deeply concerning. So what does all of this actually mean for our day-to-day work? How should this evidence change what we do in the angio suite on a Monday morning? Well, the investigators themselves leave no room for doubt. Their conclusion, stated plainly, is this: These findings do not support the routine use of paclitaxel-coated devices in patients with intermittent claudication. It really doesn't get any clearer than that.
From an examiner's point of view, the takeaways are crystal clear. 1. Our revascularization strategy must be driven by symptom relief and quality of life. Full stop. 2. We have to stop chasing surrogate endpoints like angiographic patency at the expense of outcomes that actually matter to patients. And 3. Simple, uncoated balloons and bare metal stents should be our default technology for treating intermittent claudication.
The final verdict on this trial is simple. It's a pass. Swedepad 2 is a practice-informing, guideline-shaping negative trial, and its greatest contribution is refocusing the entire field on what truly matters, outcomes that are meaningful to the patient, not just pictures on an angiogram.
And this leaves us with a final provocative thought. If the answer isn't more expensive, drug-coated technology, then where should our focus and our innovation be directed to truly improve the lives of patients suffering with claudication? That's the challenge this trial leaves us with.